Start, bench, cut these 3 Penn State running backs in college. Can you tell me who Penn State football is playing this weekend?
Sorry, what?
Welcome back into the Penn State Pulse. I'm your host, Dawson. Penn State topped UCLA 27-11 on Saturday, and although the score doesn't fully indicate it, PSU dominated this game from start to finish. I've heard a lot of people say that was a boring game, and it certainly wasn't an all-time classic, but that's because there was never really a threat from the Bruins at any point in the matchup. Let's get going with things that stood out most to me. This one was on top of my areas for improvement segment last week, and it's made its way to the positive side of news coverage for now. That is the Penn State kicking game. Walk-on Ryan Barker got the start for the Nittany Lions, and he showed off a perfect performance on the day. Barker was able to go 3 for 3 on extra points and drilled 2 field goals, one of which was from 40 yards out. I was calling for him to possibly win the starting job back in the offseason, and it looks like that has finally come to fruition just a bit later than expected. As of right now, that place kicker job is absolutely Ryan Barker's to lose. Next up, a new deep threat appears to be emerging in the Penn State wide receiver room, and that is Liam Clifford, who caught 3 balls for 107 yards on Saturday. His long on the day went for 57 on a beautiful ball from Drew Aller. Liam has been shaking loose in the last few games and finding open spaces down the field, especially up the seams. That's what his touchdown came on against Illinois, I believe. No, I think that's wrong. Someone correct me, let me know when that was. But he was talked about a ton as this team's wide receiver too, all offseason after creating a bunch of buzz. He ended up working his way through an injury in the first few games of the season, which kept him off the field. I don't think he even saw a target against West Virginia or Bowling Green. But now that he's healthy, Clifford appears to be building momentum. That'll absolutely be welcomed from Penn State as they enter this huge 4-game stretch on the schedule. For those unaware, the Nittany Lions' next 4 opponents are at USC, at Wisconsin, which is looking like a primetime 7:30 kickoff, and then versus Ohio State, and finally versus Washington in the whiteout, who of course just knocked off the Michigan Wolverines. PSU does have a bye week sandwiched in there between USC and Wisconsin, so that will help a bit, especially with allowing this team full of bumps and bruises right now to rest up a bit and heal up. Next up, edge rushers seem to be rounding into form for the Nittany Lions. I have to hit on my guy Dani Dennis-Sutton. We all know what Abdul Carter brings to the table already. He's been turning it up a notch in the last few games now at the end. But what a showing from big number 33 DDS against the Bruins. It may not have shown up on the stat sheet, but Dani was straight up disruptive on Saturday. Shout out DisruptU. That man probably had half a dozen QB pressures and was a split second away on like 3 separate strip sacks. Dani came into Penn State as a 5-star recruit out of high school. He was a big-time prospect with all the tools. I mean, he chose Penn State over Georgia and Alabama. That was his final 3 schools. So he was obviously a very talented player from the moment he arrived on campus. But the one thing that he really wanted to work on was his bend and playing at a lower pad level. It's not easy to do when you're about 6'6", 270 pounds. But man, I think he's figuring it out. At his size, to bend like he does on some of those plays as a pass rusher is just NFL level stuff, and he can move too for that size. So Dani is rounding into form, and guess what? That means the Penn State Nittany Lions have another elite edge duo. Finally, for things that I really liked, less penalties. This is another one that's been in the negative segments and has moved its way into the positive, at least for now. It's obvious that James Franklin and the staff have been stressing the penalties to this team. They were much improved in that department against UCLA as they had just 2 penalties for 20 yards. That was great to see. We can't say it's fixed after only 1 game, but that was certainly a positive sign as they seem to be headed in the right direction. All right, moving on. Let's take a look at some of the negative as the Nittany Lions get ready for the meat of their schedule. The first one, which is becoming a big one in my opinion, is the slow starts. On both sides of the ball, they're becoming a real issue for this team. It's been almost every game now that the defense has given up points or at least significant yards on the opponent's first drive of the game. Do that this weekend against USC, and you're probably down 7-0 on the road 3 or 4 minutes into that game. Although no longer ranked, that is a very talented football team in USC, especially on the offensive side of the ball. The Penn State offense has had its struggles as well in not only the first quarter, but the first half of most games on the year. They've gone into the half with 20 points against West Virginia, 20 against Bowling Green, 28 against Kent State, which I believe was actually under the betting line for that, and then 7 against Illinois and 14 against UCLA. So the offense's first half production does appear to be getting a bit worse as the season progresses. Hopefully they can come out of the gate aggressive and confident this Saturday, because that would go a very long way in determining what the rest of that game looks like for Penn State. Next up, no Nick is a problem. So there's good news and bad news here, and of course I'll give you guys the bad news first. Penn State's ground game is a shell of itself with no Nick Singleton. Don't get me wrong, Kaytron Allen's a great back and probably even better than Nick in some situations, but it's about the absence of that dynamic duo that they provide together when both are healthy and playing. PSU only rushed for 85 yards and 2.8 yards per carry on Saturday with no Nick Singleton, and that was against a pretty subpar UCLA run defense. I would have liked to see Quentin Martin receive more carries, and I really thought he would, but only one on the day for the true freshman back out of Pittsburgh. Kaytron went 21 carries for 78 yards and a touchdown on the day, which comes out to only 3.7 yards per carry. It's not terrible, but it's nowhere near what him or Nick have been averaging on the season. Now, while you guys are getting a little sweaty, maybe cashing out that bet for PSU Moneyline this weekend, I do have some good news to deliver, so just hang on a second. Nick Singleton was just dealing with something minor and should absolutely be back in action this Saturday against the Trojans. James Franklin even said in his post-game presser that Nick was a true game-time decision against UCLA, and between Nick, the staff, and team doctors, they just decided to hold off on him playing. That decision was made after he suited up, warmed up, and was announced as a starter in Beaver Stadium to the crowd. So please don't freak out. PSU should have one of their top weapons on offense back this Saturday. Speaking of that game on Saturday, it's coming up very quickly, only 4 days away now as I'm recording this. Penn State opened as a 2.5 or 3 point favorite this week, and that's all the way up to 5.5 currently. So the public money is coming in to Penn State. The game is set for a 3:30 p.m. kickoff on CBS, which will be 12:30 local time out there in Cali. I can't wait for this one. It should be an awesome game, only 4 days away. So that is going to do it for today's episode of the Penn State Pulse. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you in a few days to dive into that big matchup with the Trojans.